start videoing now. Have you already been videoing?
I just started.
Okay.
You did.
So, escrow process is a timeline. In today's world, it's super competitive, so our timeline is a bit condensed. Most offers are going to be about 21-day closes. So on day 21, we close. Day 0 is the date that your offer is accepted. We're going to have different deadlines throughout and eventually come to close. Makes sense? Okay. First deadline is day 3. This is when the EMD, or earnest money deposit, is due. The earnest money deposit is typically 1 to 3% of the purchase price. We don't go more than 3 because per the contract, the seller can only retain up to 3%. So that's the max. Make sense? We usually go for 1 because that's the minimum amount at risk if
Something
you
happened.
remove all contingencies and still decide to cancel. So this money gets wired to escrow. Nowadays we do wires. It goes into this neutral third-party account called an escrow account. Escrow holds the money, the seller doesn't get it, the buyer doesn't have it, it's just held in the middle. You have a safety net protecting this money. That safety net is called contingencies. You have a few of them. The first one is title, T for title. Next one is inspection,
Appraisal.
disclosure, appraisal, loan, and HOA. We usually say title, high school. The last one would be sale if they have to sell a property to buy one. In this market, forget about that. So these are our contingencies. You can cancel for any reason based on a contingency and get this back. So once we get the offer accepted, the next thing we would want to do is schedule the home inspection. A general home inspection is like going to the doctor and getting an overall physical or checkup. And then that home inspector will refer you to a specialist if they notice symptoms of bigger problems. So if you go to the doctor and they say, oh, you have a heart murmur, who are they going to send you to?
Cardiologist.
Exactly. If you get a home inspection and they see some moisture in the attic, they're going to send you to a roofer. Make sense? The home inspectors are not specialists. The home inspection costs anywhere from $400 to $600 for a general home inspection. And then you have follow-up inspections that you might have to pay for as well. This is a sunk cost. If you cancel, you'll get your deposit back, but you won't get the cost of the inspections back. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Next is disclosures. The seller has to deliver disclosures by day 7. And then HOA docs are supposed to be delivered by day 7 as well. Then,
so seller disclosure is basically like anything that, to their knowledge that
has happened
on their
any
property.
known material defects,
Okay.
deaths, meth labs, water leaks, improvements, all should be in the seller disclosures.
Right.
So
what happens if, say, there was a water intrusion on the slab and somebody knowingly knew that, and then they fixed it by putting flooring on top,
and there was still the leak?
What would be the repercussion if
they
later
do
on
not disclose it?
If they do not disclose it.
It would be a lawsuit for non-disclosure.
Okay.
Yep, and you would have grounds if you can prove it.
Right.
So, on day 10, again, typically would be our first contingency removal deadline in this market. All of this is subject to change based on the negotiation of the contract. So, but this is just kind of a general guideline to demonstrate how it will work. Okay.
Sorry, can you say day
What
10?
was day 10 again? Yeah, sorry.
The first contingency removal.
Okay.
Contingency removal is active, meaning you have to submit a contingency removal form. They don't just fall off.
Right.
So it's a conscious decision that your buyers have to sign and say, okay, I'm removing these contingencies. I understand I cannot cancel and get my deposit back based on these contingencies any longer. Everybody following? Okay. So this period from day 0 to day 10 is our discovery period. Going into escrow is like dating. You like somebody, you're gonna be exclusive with them, and then you find out all the stuff and decide if you wanna get engaged, and then at close you're getting married. Make sense?
Yeah.
So once you open escrow, this is where our work starts to try to discover all the dirt on the property. So first we get the home inspection, we schedule follow-up inspections, we're gonna get a preliminary title report, which helps us find out if there's any wonky transfers of title. It ensures the title of the property and that the transfers have been appropriate. It clears any liens off the property, any back due social security or taxes, and then it lets you know about any easements and the property lines. That's all under title. Then we have inspection, then we get the seller disclosures. Once we get the seller disclosures, we want to go through those with a fine-tooth comb, find any inconsistencies, and ask as many questions as we can. Why?
Lies.
Yeah, pretty much. Sellers will disclose as little as possible per the forms and per the questions that they're asked. So, for example, it asks, has a death occurred on the property in the last 2 years? Well, if you're afraid of ghosts, you might want to know, has a death ever occurred on the property? If you don't ask the specific question, they don't have to tell you. If you ask the question, they cannot lie.
Right.
Make sense? Yeah. So we ask as many questions as possible. Another example of that is if they disclose that they had a slab leak, then you say, okay, was there an insurance claim filed? Who did the work? Do you have invoices? Why are we asking these things?
To make sure that
Clean title.
To make sure it was done properly and
Right.
they didn't pay Jose next door to put flooring over it. Because with an insurance claim, you can take the money and run. You don't necessarily have to pay a professional to do the repair. Okay? So in our discovery period, we review the prelim, we do our inspections. We don't have to take the property as is. You can do a request for repairs. The way a request for repairs works is we are happy to move forward with the transaction if you repair X, Y, and Z or offer us a credit of this amount. And the seller could say yes, could say no, could counter, and it's another negotiation point. Then you review disclosures and HOA docs if there are any, and then you have a decision, okay, am I ready to move forward with this transaction? If the answer is yes, then you submit your contingency removal, saying I'm removing my right to cancel based on this, this, and this. So now, all of your loose contingencies are kind of gone.
except the
So
appraisal.
we always say you can cancel for any reason until day 10, because we can come up with a reason to cancel on the inspection, disclosures, or title. You can just say you don't like something and find a valid reason to cancel. When it comes to appraisal and loan, these are a lot more strict because you have to show them a low appraisal or a loan denial letter to get out of the agreement. Okay? So that usually comes, contingency removal 1 based on the contract is gonna be around 10 to 17 days. Contingency removal 2 is gonna be around 14 to 21 days depending on your timelines of the contract. So appraisal, right when you go under contract, you let your lender know, and the lender is gonna order an appraisal. If you aren't getting a loan on the property, you don't have to have an appraisal. You can remove that contingency. If you are getting a loan on the property, you have to get an appraisal because the bank will only lend up to whatever the percentage is of appraised value. So if somebody's doing a conventional 20% down loan, the bank will only give 80% of appraised value. So if the appraisal comes in low, that's another negotiation point. We want to go to the seller and say, hey, the appraisal came in low, lower your price to appraised value. They can say no, you guys can part ways, you get your deposit back, and you move on. Or you can agree to come up on price and pay cash for that difference if the seller won't come down, or you can negotiate and meet part way. It's another negotiation point if the appraisal does not come in at value. 9 times out of 10, it just comes in at value because the appraiser sees the contract and says, obviously, if they got this price, then that's market value. In a rare circumstance, the appraisal will come in higher than the purchase price, which is a slam dunk score. Your client has instant equity. You don't tell the seller about that. Make sense? Yeah. The purchase price can never go up after an appraisal, it can only go down. Next is loan. So you'd be communicating with the lender and saying, okay, do we have full loan approval? Once the lender says you're good to go, then you can remove this one. So CR2 would be around day 14 to 17. You say, okay, we got a good appraisal, the loan is ready to go, and you remove these. So this is around, say, day 14. A week later, we're supposed to close. A lot has to happen in this short period of time. The lender has to issue something called a CD. Then there's a mandatory 3-day waiting period before we can get docs. Then they have to sign with the notary. Then they have to send those signed documents back to the lender. The lender has to review those documents, fund the loan, then the escrow has to disperse the loan, and then title has to record. So a lot has to happen in a very short period of time. The reason I tell you this is because this time can shift by a day or two, because if, say, the notary misses a signature, well, now we have to send the docs back to the buyer to sign. The buyer's at work, then they can't sign until the next day, we miss the funding deadline, and it gets pushed back a day. So I always tell people, don't show up on the day of close with a moving truck. Know that this might change and there's nothing we can do about it, because there's so many parties involved that dictate when we close. Make sense?
Yep.
Once you've removed your contingencies, you can still cancel, you just lose your deposit, your safety net is gone. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. This will be on your